So I found myself crying on my bedroom floor, grieving the loss of something that I could never get. And there were kind of two realizations. The realization that I couldn't get it and the realization that I may never get it. And that kind of sums up the seeking energy. For me, the seeking energy had played out more through my mind. So I had been seeking more intellectually, thinking that I could get the answer. And I think everybody's seeking energy maybe plays out differently, but from what I have seen, it seems like it either plays out through the mind where you're trying to get an answer, or it plays out more through practices and things like that, where you feel like if I do these practices, then I will get somewhere. So it's either feeling you can get it or get somewhere, but maybe there's more ways of seeking than that. But those seem to be like the main two that come up. So this is essentially when my seeking energy finally let go, when I knew I couldn't get it, and I knew that I maybe never would get it. And so with that, I found myself crying on my bedroom floor. And there was a real finality to that feeling, that it may never happen. And so I had listened, by that point, I'd done about 8 years of seeking. Maybe 2 of those I didn't really look at anything. So, and I'd heard many teachers say that the seeking energy has to kind of burn out before, if there's going to be an awakening, the seeking energy has to burn out first before that can happen. And I remember going to one meeting actually in London and somebody saying that to me and feeling really annoyed at them, because I was just thinking, because it was like up until that point I'd done about 8 years thinking I was on this path, on this journey, and realizing that it hadn't even actually started, So yeah, that was a kind of brutal truth that I really needed to hear. And at the time, so that was kind of like the radical message. And I think I really needed to hear the brutal truth of the radical message. And so that kind of started. So once I'd done about a year of the radical message, that's when I found Kundalini activation. I'd basically, as well, up until that point, I'd convinced myself at certain points. So the seeking energy maybe waned for a few, sometimes years, sometimes months. And I'd kind of convinced myself that I'm done with the seeking energy because, I'm not feeling that same drive towards it. And other times I just stopped looking, and each time I'd convince myself that the seeking energy was over. But of course that wasn't really the case. And then I heard this other teacher say that she found Kundalini activation, and that kind of started her on more of an emotional deep dive, and that was what kind of helped her progress more on the enlightenment path. So I thought, okay, I'll do Kundalini activation. So I did. And yeah, I suppose this teacher said that there was the reason why the seeking energy perpetuates is because there is some underlying emotional reason as to why, some emotional thing that you haven't looked at that is perpetuating the seeking energy. And I hadn't heard anybody say that before. So I thought, okay, well, at the very least, I can go and do some Kundalini activation and get emotionally balanced. So even if nothing kind of comes from that, I can at least be more emotionally balanced, because I realized I had been doing some spiritual bypassing and avoiding of my emotions. And basically it was about, I don't know how many months into doing Kundalini activation, maybe somewhere between 6 and 8 months, something like that, where the seeking energy finally let go. And how do I know it has been let go? Because really it seems as if people can really reference the moment when it happened. And for me, it was on my bedroom floor when I was crying. I can really reference that as the total end to the seeking energy. And looking back now, really, I can see how the seeking energy got perpetuated, though going forward, I never really saw it. And I think also when you hear teachers say the seeking energy has to kind of burn out before any awakening typically begins, that can really, that can really annoy the seeker. Like, that is the last thing the seeker wants to hear. But at the same time, that message was the best thing I could hear. It was the thing that I needed to hear the most, because I started to think about it more, and I was more open to what I could do to, I suppose, let go of the energy, rather than just living in the chaotic energy. And so yeah, looking back, I can see that believing that the seeking energy had waned because I just wasn't looking at as many YouTube videos, or I wasn't looking in as many books, or talking about it with as many people, or going to meetings, or just believing. I think for 2 years I was just like, I'm done. I don't really want this path anymore. It's too hard and too difficult. So whatever my mind was coming up with and saying really was just another way to perpetuate the seeking energy, because you can't really give up. That's the other thing, is giving up, trying to give up perpetuates the seeking energy, because really the seeking energy has to be addressed. But obviously it's different for everybody how that seeking energy gets addressed, which is why it makes it so tricky. But I reckon there must be some commonalities, but for me it was definitely looking, if you've been more on the spiritual bypassing side, I would definitely suggest looking at the emotional stuff that you may have been ignoring, because for me that really did work. And also, I think when you are in the seeking energy, you don't really understand the seeking energy, strangely enough, until the seeking energy is over, because that's when I really understood it. That's when I really saw it for what it was, and I suppose I had heard it being talked about before as like a dog chasing its own tail and getting stuck either in the mind loop or being stuck in the body loop. And that is a really good way of expressing it, I think. And also, I think that the more people talk to you about ending the seeking energy, the more you can kind of get frustrated, because you're kind of stuck between knowing you can't give the seeking energy up and still the seeking energy persists. So it's like you have to come out of those two mindsets of like those two opposites, and find some other way, which is not always easy, and sometimes that way only appears when it appears, and that's the thing, is kind of the way is only really going to turn up when it turns up. And that's kind of what happened to me. I had no idea that Kundalini activation was going to be the thing that helped me to let go of the seeking energy, and yet that's what it did. see you later.